Good Saturday morning. The book group met last night, and the book that we had been reading, we give ourselves 2 months in our book group, was Robert Harris's An Officer and a Spy. There is a medium story with this, and I'm just going to give a little bit of a reading from that. So, if I saw this book in a bookshop, I would pass it by because I think it was something like a James Bond espionage novel, which I don't think I'm particularly into. What's different about this book is that Robert Harris draws on the Dreyfus Affair and brings the characters that were involved in the Dreyfus Affair alive in the novel. So what was the Dreyfus Affair? So Alfred Dreyfus was a captain in the French army, and he was convicted of treason. It was believed that he was a German spy. Now, Dreyfus was Jewish, and at this time in France, so we're talking about 1890 to the early 1900s, the anti-Semitism was at serious levels in France. I think the Jewish population in France is still around 5% today. It probably was higher then. So Alfred Dreyfus was framed as a spy, and it was believed and proved to be based on anti-Semitism by senior army officers. So along comes this character Picard, who becomes a colonel in the intelligence services. Now, he's involved in a very minor role in the prosecution of Alfred Dreyfus, but in a minor role. When he gets into this role as colonel in the intelligence corps, he then discovers that he has some questions about whether it's a safe conviction or not. Now, Dreyfus is taken to what's called Devil's Island in French Guiana, and is given quite an isolation and treated pretty harsh. Well, not pretty, very harshly. And he remains there for 4 years. So what happens to Picard is he then decides to start asking questions, and when he looks further, he discovers that there was a spy, a guy called Esterhazy, and he begins to try to bring this to light, but there's a resistance to doing so by the senior officers. It's not clear to me whether it's because they're protecting Esterhazy or protecting themselves, that they don't want to be shown as incompetent, or indeed that there was a whole plot against Dreyfus for being Jewish. So, although the story centres on the Dreyfus Affair, in my view, it's kind of following the story of Picard and his involvement initially, his discovery of some setup, his attempts to bring justice about, and then the rebuttal. In the book, there is a quote by Aristotle, which says, "The true measure of a man's character is his actions." And this is a quote that's used in relation to, after the whole matter is settled, Picard is someone views him as anti-Semitic, and he uses this quote from Aristotle. I kind of played with the quote and thinking the measure of a good read is if I get to the end of it, because quite often, as my book group members know, I don't get to the end of the book. In this case, I did the whole 608 pages of it. The book's divided into 2 parts. Part 1 was okay, pretty enjoyable, but slow for me to read. It felt like I was walking in and out of offices in the Ministry of War. But the second, when we move into part 2, when Picard becomes the subject of allegation, trial, and he begins to get set up, that's when the pace quickens. Not quite sure why that is, but the pace certainly quickened. So I read probably the second part of the book, which was probably about 300 pages in a week, whereas the previous 300 pages took about 4 weeks. There is another quote from now here's me going for how to say Dostoevsky, yeah, the Russian novelist, which is in the book, which is what is a hero, what makes a hero, courage, strength, morality, and withstanding adversity. And of course, the tale of both Dreyfus and Picard is that keeps them going. Now, the amazing bit towards the end is this Esterhazy is subject to a trial, a court-martial, but is found not guilty. But knowing that his days may be numbered, he flees. And where does he flee to? He flees to Harpenden in Hertfordshire, 6 miles up the road from here. And he's buried in St Nicholas's churchyard, it is said, under a different name. So that was a bit of a shock that this Esterhazy ended up living the rest of his days out in Harpenden. Just a final note is historical fiction has the power to bring alive history to people like me who may never find it. I didn't know of the Dreyfus Affair prior to reading the book. It also gave me a resource, as someone who occasionally finds himself as a lone voice, to draw on and to be encouraged by, that if you believe in what's right, that you will withstand the adversity that comes, even at quite a great cost, for both these men, but particularly for Dreyfus. There's also a film, I don't think it's subtitled in English, that was produced by Roman Polanski, An Officer and a Spy, Je Accuse, which was filmed in 2019. Okay, have a good day.